What's going on, everyone? It's another episode of the WVSports.com podcast. I'm Wesley Shoemaker, joined, as always, by the one and only Keenan Cummings. A lot to talk about on the football front here for the West Virginia Mountaineers as they are headed to their bowl game and will play Memphis tomorrow night. But first and foremost, they officially introduced Rich Rodriguez as their 36th head coach on Friday. His contract details were reported by Keenan specifically today. And there's a lot to dive into what was a pretty wild afternoon at the West Virginia Coliseum on Friday. Pat McAfee was there. His show was there. For a press conference, it certainly didn't feel like a press conference, Keenan. So just let's start there. A lot of people were there. McAfee was there. The vibes were high. He came out. He had a huge ovation from everyone except one little person there. And so there was a minor interruption at the start, and then Rich had a pretty good handle of that, I would say. I thought he kind of nailed that as best as he could have in the moment. And it was more of a storytelling time, I would say, than really a question and answer period. Yeah, there were some questions and some answers, but it was more, I would say, Rodriguez feeling at home and feeling comfortable. So what do you think of the whole entire day that was the Rich Rodriguez press conference?
I think it was well received for the most part, outside that one guy who waited 17 years to get his thoughts in, but that's a whole different story. I thought Rich handled it pretty well. I mean, he said a lot of things that I think a lot of people wanted to hear. The commitment, and you've seen that in the contract, to build a good staff. We'll get into some of that later, to build a good staff around him, the incentives based towards winning. I wrote an article, I think it ran today, that, I don't know if you put expectations, in terms of numbers, but it's clear that West Virginia expects this thing to be competing for Big 12 championships. That it's clear that's the message, that's the financial commitment. That's the direction this whole thing's going. I thought Rich handled it well. I thought he said a lot of the right things. Even the situation you're talking about, who let the Pitt fan in here? I thought that was handled well. He talked about his maturity as a coach, how he's developed as a person. And he's right. I mean, you're not going to win everybody overnight on a press conference. I don't care what Rich Rodriguez would have said. There's still some, it was a tense split. There's some old wounds there that is going to be tough to heal for some people. And I think that you've seen in the days since the press conference, more of those people that were on the fence are teetering more towards the positive side than they were beforehand. I think some people had their questions answered. Some people, heard what they needed to hear, but you're always going to have a small segment or a segment out there. I don't want to put a number on it, but a segment that, is not going to be happy until, certain things happen. And I think that it was very important. He didn't dive too much into it. And I don't think, that's really the time and place necessarily. Outside some comments, admitted it was a mistake. But I thought the thing that I took away from it more than anything that Rich said, outside the obviously, you got to beat Pitt and all those type of comments was, he wants to earn people's trust back. He understands it's not a given. It's going to take some time. He wants to do it. He wants to put a tough product out on the field. And we talked about it on our last podcast, Wes. That is what these teams are known for. You are playing a Rich Rodriguez football team. I don't care what level it's at. They're tough. They're physical. They pride themselves on that. It doesn't always lead to wins, but that you played them and you don't want to play a team like that. And that's the DNA of the state. That's the people. I was born and raised here. I grew up in it. I understand it. And Rich is the same. He said that, there's not many places where he grew up here. He went to school here. He was an athlete here. He's coached here. He understands it. And I think that's clear. And that's no knock on any coach that's come since Rich. I think there's been great ambassadors for the program during that time, but he gets it. He gets it in a way that really it's hard to get it unless you've done it and you've lived it. And I think that message is one that I think anybody, if they're willing to listen, it probably made them pretty happy to hear.
Yeah, I think that you talked about him talking about how he wish he never left. I feel like that was the most said line by him throughout that entire press conference was, I wish I had never left, or if I had not left, things like that. But I also think that outburst, I think that's an important thing to talk about, just because I think it does show that there are people in this fan base that are still upset. And that kind of, to me at least, shows the value of the fan base. I know Ren Baker talked about how valuable this fan base is and how important it is for him to get it right for them because of their passion. And it shows a level of passion if you have fans that, when a whole arena is cheering for someone, still care enough to kind of voice their opinion. Do I think it was the right scenario to do that? Probably not. But in fairness to that fan, I'm not sure there's another time where they could have voiced their opinion. And so let them do that. Was it handled well? Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure there was a better thing he could have said other than the pit line. And then also the word resources, that word was also thrown around. And I know we're going to get into the resources of his contract here, but there's a serious commitment to Rodriguez through financial backing. And I know we talked about that when he was first hired, but you're really kind of seeing that and hearing that from more than just reports. You're hearing that from Ren Baker. You're hearing that from Rich himself. And so that goes a long way too. But it's not going to be an overnight fix for him. The people who are against him or who are not in his corner per se yet, they're not going to be changed from a press conference or from now until January. It will take some time, but I think he is truly committed to doing everything he can to do this job the right way and at the highest of levels.
Yeah, and I think the make it right line, he said that a few times as well. And I think that matters. It's clear. Rich was emotional at times in that press conference, and it was sincere. You could tell that he almost couldn't get out, his last couple lines. He had to take a minute there. He admitted it. He's been thinking about this for a long time. Never thought this moment would come, and now it's here. He has a chance to kind of rewrite that story. And, I was, watching, kind of go back and watch some of the Pat McAfee show since we were there, and it's something Pat talked about. He's carried it around. It's been a burden for him, and how it's almost like you don't talk about that era as much as you should just because of the way it ended and what happened with Rich over top the program. Well, now you have a chance to right those wrongs. And life doesn't throw you many quote unquote storybook type of opportunities like this. And it's a real chance for Rich Rodriguez to kind of rewrite the entire narrative. And you could tell, he's motivated. He's fired up. That this is a guy that, it's 17 years later, but you can tell that those coals are still burning hot. We've talked about it. He had success at Jacksonville State, which anytime you transition from FCS to FBS, that's not easy. He had 9 wins 3 years in a row. The guy can still coach. And most importantly, perhaps above anything, at least in my opinion, is his commitment and the school's commitment to surrounding him with high-level assistance and the resources there to be as productive as he can be. I think that you look at some of the incentives in that contract, almost all of them are tied to winning. You got to win a certain amount of games. You got to get to the Big 12 championship, Coach of the Year awards, things that, define successful seasons. That's the goal. That's the expectations. And it's good that it's kind of right there written out for us that that's what is expected. You want West Virginia to be in a place in a Big 12 conference that's as open as any power league. I'd argue maybe the ACC, but it's wide open. And this is a proud program that's had a lot of success. It's been toiling around, for the better part of the last 17 years, not really being able to capture that momentum. There's been some high points, yes, and I'm not undermining anything that occurred, but the expectations, kind of the foundation that Rich Rodriguez kind of put in place, taking over from Don Nehlen, people expected to be in the conference championship race every year. Now, granted, it was a different league. It was a different time. But you look at this Big 12, it's not that much different in terms of the way it's made up than the Big East. Yeah, there's more teams. But look at Arizona State this past year. And that's going to be the example everyone points to. They're picked last, and they won the league. They won 11
Started
games.
From the bottom, now we're here.
Yeah, and that's where West Virginia's not at the bottom. I think that's a good thing to point out here. I know that they've underperformed, the last 6 years, but I do agree that I think Neil Brown left this program in a good spot in terms of infrastructure. They're going to have to get some better players, but that is the truth no matter where you coach. Every school is going to use the well, maybe not. Well, Clemson finally got one, but other than Clemson, every school is going to use the transfer portal and replenish their roster. That's going to be a focus here as well. That's going to continue recruiting. I know that's a concern for some people with the staff not in place, but this recruiting is going to continue, guys. It's a quiet period right now, which the way this works anymore, pretty much from a recruiting perspective, is it's a lot like NFL free agency. Agents kind of run a lot of these recruitments. You set up visits. Some of these visits are day. You're at school for a day. You visit 5 or 6 of them, and you make a decision try to get enrolled in time for the midterms. You can't get that. There's always, just because the portal closes, if you're in it, you're in it. You can technically commit at any time. You might have to wait to enroll until after the spring, but there's going to be more movement there too. The spring period is going to bring new names. There's a lot left to play out here in terms of roster construction. So you don't need to panic yet. Everybody take a step back. But I think overall the message was positive. I think it was well received. And really, I think Rich handled it about as well as he could.
Yeah, if we're grading that, I say it was as close to an A or A+ as he could have gotten, truthfully. And to your point about resources, it's not even the resources just to the coaching staff. It's the implied resources that we are going to try and get the best players we can get that fit what we want to do. And then we are also going to invest in their development through coaching, through high-level coaches, through trying to pay these assistants. And so that's a key part of it too. And then just the thought of it all, of there is a serious commitment to the football side of things compared to when Neil took over, right? Like the difference between how things are now compared to 2019 in January, that's a big deal. And then going off to what you said there about the transfers, I think Rich was very upfront about that. There's going to be some guys that are going to transfer out after spring ball. There are guys that are going to transfer in after spring ball, that he's always going to be honest with his players, and that's what he views as the best option for them.
Yeah, fit matters, and it's certainly going to matter here. Rich has a type of coaching that's not for everybody, but you've seen that, once he gets his guys in, and a lot of people have kind of asked me, off to the side and messaged me, how's it going to work, in terms of the transfer portal. And I think Ren Baker addressed it really well. Rich deals with this every year at Jacksonville State. I mean, his roster gets picked apart, so he's got to kind of rebuild things. So it's a different world, even from 2019. Back then you had the hard cap of 25. You were kind of stuck with what you got. You had to build it up over time. Now you can pretty much flip your whole roster if you want. I'm not saying that's going to occur here, but it's certainly a possibility. If you're looking at all the different lines and threads of possibilities out there, they could add a ton of players by the time this is over, or maybe they retain most of the roster. We don't have those answers yet, but the point is they're equipped to do it. Now it's about doing it. Being equipped and actually closing the deal are two different things, but I think just the positive vibe around the program right now is something that really I haven't seen in quite a while. I think that, you saw a little bit of that. You saw glimmers of that before the start of this year. People were kind of buying in. Obviously, we all know how that turned out, but there's a lot of momentum right now. And anytime you have, ESPN, for whatever reason, covering the press conference of Rich Rodriguez at West Virginia, which is 6-6 in the season, it's a good thing for the program. You cannot buy that type of exposure, and that's going to spill down into recruiting too. I think that's going to help, and just the feelings around the program right now, a lot of nostalgia for people. I'm not sure. No one knows how this will work out, but on day whatever it is, since Rich got hired on the 11th, I would say that the overall feelings, thoughts, hopes of the program are as high as they've been in quite some time.
I agree. So let's go into his contract a little bit. We got the details today. 5 years, starting at $3.5 million as his salary in 2025, increasing by $100,000 each year through 2029, which will then be at $3.9 million. But then the big part, I think there's a strong commitment to the staff, as you write. There's a salary pool of $5 million for on-field assistance. And now on-field assistance, I feel like, means a lot of things now, considering that anyone and everyone can be on the field. But that's a large chunk of money, Keenan. So before we even get to the incentives, let's just talk about that, about this assistant pool and what it could mean for West Virginia.
Yeah, and it's actually at least $5 million, and there's also $2.5 million for football support staff. At least $2.5 million. That's a lot of money. I think that West Virginia is going to be able, and Rich is going to be able to bring in some quality coaches with that. You can't underplay that. It takes money to win at high level football now. I mean, I don't know any other way to say it. It's always taken money. It probably takes more money than ever now, because now paying the players, the coaches. I mean, it's an entire outfit. And I mentioned earlier, there's kind of a pro element to this, and that's really what it's starting to turn into, pretty much across the board. West Virginia's going to pay his buyout for Jacksonville State, $1.25 million. But overall, I think you look at the contract, the memorandum of understanding that we got, and it is pretty much what we had thought it could possibly be. It's good for West Virginia when it comes to building the program. We talked about, you mentioned the incentives. They're all tied to wins. You get, some of them are non-cumulative. You get the number. You're not going to get 8, 9, 10 if you win 10 games. You'll get 10 wins, the amount there. But they have it up to 12 wins. He could make up to $700,000 more. Big 12 championship incentives. You can make up to $250,000 more if the team finishes first place and wins the Big 12 title. With bowl games, $50,000 for a bowl appearance, $75,000 for a bowl win. And then you got your college football playoffs. You could get up to $750,000 there if you win the college football playoff national title. So a lot of incentives. There's more with Coach of the Year awards and academic performance rating, but it's kind of like what was reported initially, heavy incentive deal and really geared towards winning. And I think that the expectation here is to win. That's been made clear by the fan base. That's been made clear by the moves that Ren Baker has made. And this only backs that up. So I think you're getting exactly what you expect if you're a West Virginia fan. And now, as I said before, now it's up for Rich and the staff that he assembles and the players that he brings in to prove it.
Yeah, I think that the incentives are very favorable for Rich, but I also think that because you expect this level of success, you expect a greater amount of revenue if you have the success. For example, if you make the Big 12 championship, you'll get more money. And if you make a college football playoff, you'll get more money, things like that. And I think that's important that they're really trying to look at win numbers as the incentive. 8 wins, 100,000, 9 wins, 200,000. Like West Virginia hasn't gotten really above 9 wins in a good while. And I know they got 2-9 last year, but that number 9 has kind of been the what's a good word here? Kind of that magic number that they can't really evade. And so I'm interested to see how he does. I also think that we've talked about this certainly off air is what is the patience level for this fan base going to be? Because they see this financial commitment from so many people. How soon do they expect him to win? And I mean, I think Keenan, if he goes 1-11 next year, but he wins that game on September 13th, that is the most important thing for all parties involved, just to kind of get the monkey off his back there early.
Yeah, I'm not trying to look ahead too much. You still got to finish this season, but
right,
that game should be nuts. I mean, absolutely nuts. That might be the craziest atmosphere at Mountaineer Field in quite some time. So
until it's a Fox Big Noon kickoff game.
No. Yeah, I'm excited excited. I think that the expectations are kind of set there. They expect at least 8 wins.
Yeah,
I think you don't set that number unless you expect it. So that's not me setting expectations. I think that's set in the contract. So we'll see. There's a lot left to play out. There's a lot of things that are going to happen between now and then. But I think as of today, you got to feel good with where West Virginia's at in the search. Ren Baker had a very thorough search. It brought him to Rich Rodriguez. I'm not sure either party initially thought that was going to happen, but it happened, and it's real. And if you're waking up from 2007, you probably think it's business as usual. But there's a lot that happened to get to here, and it's a very, very interesting and exciting chapter, regardless how it goes. Just to see, you remove the what ifs. There's always been that sense of what if in the fan base that, obviously we all know, what if Rich wouldn't have left, what would have happened? Now you're going to find out. It's a little bit of a different situation, obviously, but those questions are going to be erased.
Yep. Moving on to the current football program and the current team and coaching staff.
Still got a bowl game.
They still got a bowl game. It is tomorrow night. It is, I believe, 9 p.m. kick. Woo!
Ooh, we'll need to take some Red Bull.
Caffeine. Yeah, man. Yeah. Let's get it
fired
going.
Up for that one. I'm getting old, man.
You said it, not me. I feel like that's a recurrent theme. But 9 p.m. kick against number 25 Memphis. Chad Scott serving as the interim. It is the last ride for Garrett Green and company. And it is the last time that maybe a lot of those folks will be in a West Virginia uniform. Who knows what will happen with the portal. But Memphis is a pretty good team, especially offensively. Keno, they went 10-2, 6-2 in the American. They won 7 of their last 8 to end the season. They beat number 17 Tulane by 10. They also beat Florida State, but I'm not sure how much that win is worth considering how the Seminoles season went. Ryan Stubblefield is the head coach of Memphis. He has a 41-20 record as the head coach of the Tigers. He is 3-0 in bowl games as head coach at Memphis, Keenan. So that is something that definitely could be a factor. And then Seth Hennigan is their quarterback. He's completed almost 65% of his passes, over 3,000 yards, 23 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He's run for 129 yards and a touchdown. He's the Americans' all-time leading passer, and he's also the winningest quarterback in Memphis history. Mario Anderson Jr., he's a running back, and the run game against Texas Tech caused the Mountaineers all types of problems, and he causes problems too. He finished third in the American in rushing, just under 1,300 yards, also had 17 touchdowns. And then Memphis had 10 receivers compile at least 90 yards this season. On defense, Memphis is allowing about 23 points per game, third best in the American. Teams are only running for just about 100 yards per game, which is pretty good. Chandler Martin, the name to remember, 94 tackles, 15 TFLs, 7 sacks, and a pick. Davion Ross, 45 tackles, 11 pass breakups, and 3 picks. And then William Whitlow Jr., 23 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks. Memphis had 10 interceptions this season, and they also forced a lot of fumbles and recovered 15 of them. So first ever meeting between the Mountaineers and Tigers. Keenan, what are your thoughts on this matchup, on this game? For me, it's Memphis has a really good offense, and West Virginia's defense severely struggled, especially in that final game against Tech, and I'm interested to see how those two clash.
I am interested to see the response from West Virginia. And I know it sounds cliche, but they've all said the right things. They've all done the right things. You know, they've really gotten after this preparation. I know it's kind of been lost in translation, which isn't necessarily fair to the team with everything that's been going on, but it's really impressive the way this roster's been held together, the way that, you know, they've kind of gotten after it. You know, everybody that was probably going to play in this game, at least any kind of snaps outside of Josiah Trotter and TJ Crandall, are going to be playing in this game. And I think that that's pretty good, at least that we know of right now. There could be another guy or two that slips out. But for West Virginia, for me, it's, you know, how do you want to finish this year? You know, I know that the deck's kind of stacked. You know, you got an interim head coach, but if anybody's going to get guys motivated, it's Chad Scott.
Yep.
I've been around him now for 6 years, and that guy, he brings the sunshine. Trust me. If it's raining, he'll bring his own sunshine. He's a guy that really can get guys motivated. I think you've seen it out of his room since he's been here. He's always had highly productive rooms. He's a voice on the team that people trust. He was the natural selection to me. There was no doubt who was going to get that tab when it came to being the interim coach in this game. So I look at things that trouble me a little bit, just looking at the numbers, and I was doing this in my preview. You like for West Virginia to get those matchups where the team doesn't stop the run if they're able to throw, and Memphis stops the run. So they might have to get a little creative, but, you know, Memphis has struggled at times with quarterbacks that can run. So it'll be interesting to see the plan that West Virginia has in this game and how they want to attack them. They're going to have to score. Memphis is going to score points in this game. I don't see this being, you know, a 12-6 type of ball game. I think both teams are going to score, but can West Virginia generate enough stops? Can they put something out there better than what happened in Lubbock? Because that wasn't that.
Not sure it can get worse, truthfully.
No, I mean, that was just a disaster. Memphis will tempo a little bit, but they're not like Texas Tech. It's not going to be, you know, but they've got to do better on first down. That was a big problem against Texas Tech. You know, they were working from behind the chains pretty much the whole game, had them off balance. So can they stop the run? Because Memphis can throw the ball, yes, but this is a team that also wants to run the football first. Can West Virginia stop the run? And when they are in passing situations, can they be in the right spots? Can they make plays? Can they give West Virginia a chance to win? Those are kind of my things that I'm looking at from a big picture view, you know, heading into this. But, you know, it's a chance for West Virginia to go 7-6 and beat a ranked team. There's a lot on the line here. You know, the difference between a 7-6 and 6-7 season with that Memphis win on it, you know, you go from not beating a team that even made a bowl game all year to beating a team that, it had a very good season. Granted, the American isn't quite the Big 12, but it's still impressive, what they were able to do this year, especially the way they closed the season.
I think for me, Keenan, and this is why I have some level of hope if you're rooting for West Virginia as a West Virginia fan, is that this is the last game possibly for a lot of these, not only players, but coaches too. I think that's an important thing to remember here is that these coaches are kind of coaching for their lives in a sense of they don't know what's next. A lot of them probably won't be back on Rich Rodriguez's staff going forward, and they might not have a guarantee of where else they might end up. And so this is their last opportunity to kind of put something positive out there to show that they can have success against a good team. And I know last year in the Mayo Bowl, West Virginia did a lot of things right, but that first play, I mean, Garrett talked about it, I think last week of they had scripted that for like 3 weeks prior. And so I'm interested to see what this break did as far as game planning and scheming. You also saw a fake field goal. Like West Virginia is going to do anything and everything they can. That's trick play, special, like anything that they can do to try and get an advantage, they will, because it's a bowl game and you're going to let it all hang anyway. But you're also going to let it all hang in more when it's possibly your last game as a coaching staff. You're having an interim tag. Like every factor that seems that someone could say goes against West Virginia, I think you could also say goes for West Virginia, just because they could do literally whatever they want because the expectation level is kind of at zero in a sense.
And in that game last year, one of the biggest differences to me is just how excited West Virginia was to be there. And I do think
they're fired up.
I think that matters. And I think they're going to be excited to play in this game too. I think that's, talk is cheap. It takes money to buy whiskey, but you've seen it in actions. You've seen it the way that they've done it, the way that they've approached it. Now we'll see if it translates into success on the field, but in the preparation for this, it's hard to fault anything that West Virginia's been able to do, to get ready for this game. And I think there's genuine excitement and a chance for this team to go out on a high note in a season that started with sky high expectations and ended about as poorly as could possibly happen.
Yeah. And I also think that as far as wanting to play, like this is Garrett Green's last shot. This is a lot of these guys' last shot at a college football game. So they're going to come inspired because the leaders of the team are going to come inspired. And I think that's important as well. So keys to victory, you kind of touched on a couple of them. For me, it's can Garrett Green take care of the football? West Virginia's going to have to control time of possession, just kind of keep that defense off the field because that's their formula for success right now is trying to limit the amount of time the defense is on the field. And so can Garrett take care of the ball? Can West Virginia move the ball? And then, as we say every single week, Keenan, can they have 7 instead of 3? So what you got for us?
Yeah, I think you hit it. I mean, I think West Virginia's got to be able to run the football. You got to be able to throw the ball too.
And I'm interested to see how they use, sorry to interrupt you, but what they did against Texas Tech, we might have gotten into it a little bit in the game recap, is they used CJ Donaldson a lot as a receiver out of the backfield. I'm interested to see kind of what they do there. I think Cole Taylor's gonna have to have a big game just because they still don't have Traylon Ray, obviously, and so where can they find that production elsewhere on offense?
Yeah, that's where I was going. They've not thrown the ball great since Traylon Ray has gone down. So I think they've got to be able to throw the football because this Memphis defense struggles in pass. I mean, that's where they struggle. I know they've gotten some picks, but teams have been able to, get some yards on them. So you got to be able to challenge them a little bit vertically, make some plays happen, even if it's off play action or, RPO type situations, but you got to be able to kind of stretch them. That was a non-factor against Texas Tech until the game was over. That's where Texas Tech struggled, and the game was over before they started trying to go down the field. So I'm not asking West Virginia to change their offense or do anything crazy, but the shot plays are there. You got to be able to connect on a few and get some momentum early. For as excited and all the great stuff we've talked about, this could snowball pretty quickly. Oh, here we go again if West Virginia is down 21-0. So I think it's important to start early and start fast in this game for West Virginia.
Maybe back-to-back bowl game first play touchdowns.
Yeah, give yourself a chance. Really, it comes down to that. There's a lot of talk in these bowl games anymore. How much they mean. Players opting out, the transfer portal. I think bowl games still matter, and they matter a lot in terms of the fan base. And people want to see their teams represent them well. And I think that's all you can ask for. I mean, you can't sit here and guarantee a win or West Virginia's going to do this, going to do that. But as long as I think it goes back to what we were talking about with Rich Rodriguez, as long as this team plays hard and represents the state right, I think everyone's going to be behind this team and hoping for the best.
That gets into our final predictions of the football season. If I had been smart, I would have gone back and tallied how our predictions actually played out. But I would say we're pretty close on them. So I'll go first here, Keenan. I've been kind of flip-flopping on this. I truthfully don't know. I could just so see an inspired West Virginia team come out and just win, but I could also see Memphis just be too much and be a handful. But I'll be optimistic. Good vibes around the program, good vibes around this team. I'll take a West Virginia win and the Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl with them winning. Let's go 36-32.
I thought I was going to be the optimistic one here. I really did. I was fully expecting you to pick Memphis. I'm not going to do the heel turn. I thought about it, but I'm not. I think West Virginia can get this done. You mentioned the senior leadership. This is a lot like I saw the Oklahoma State game earlier this year, and it didn't go anything like we thought. Mm-hmm. I think if West Virginia wins, it's going to be a close game. But I could totally see Memphis, getting control of this game earlier and winning. But I'm going to take the path of the light here. I think West Virginia is going to win this game in a 38-35 special.
Look at us with these high-scoring affairs, but I'm not sure points will be at a premium at all. I think points might be easy to come by. So that'll do it for this episode of the WestVirginiaSports.com podcast. Tomorrow, Tuesday, if you're listening on Tuesday, Tuesday is bowl game day. So keep it locked on our website. Go hop on the Blue Lot and get to chit chat. And it's the last time you get to do this until September of 2025. And so we will be with you all throughout the late night. That is Tuesday. Kickoff is set for 9 p.m.
We haven't had a lot of late nights recently, though. I mean, nothing's been going on.
Yeah, no, nothing. We've just been chilling the entire time. But
getting ready for the Frisco Bowl.
Exactly, getting ready for the Frisco Bowl. So I'm Wesley Shoemaker, joined by Keenan Cummings, and this was another episode of the WestVirginiaSports.com podcast.